Thank you guys for tuning in to another episode of Let's Address This with Goss and Rashid. I'm extraordinarily excited about this conversation. It is in cohort with my good friend Gaby Goldstein, founder and president of State Futures, with fantastic champion of democracy, Rep. Justin Pearson of Tennessee. Rep. Pearson, thank you for joining us today.
Thanks so much for having me. Glad to be with you. Glad to be in this fight together.
We have a lot to discuss, so we'll just kind of dive right in. And we want to talk more first about your personal experience, and then I know we want to talk about some of the broader work that State Futures is doing to protect democracy and fight fascism on the state level. But there's this iconic photo of you, and when we put this up on YouTube, I'm going to show the photo to folks where you're staring down the sergeant in arms, or he's staring you down, depending on perspective. And to me, that reminded me of the historical example of a white man who's an agent of the state with the license to kill standing and blocking a black person from basic human dignity and civil rights. I don't know if that's what you intended, but that's what I saw in that picture. Can you talk about that moment? What was going through your mind and why you felt you needed to be present in that moment?
Yeah, I mean, I serve in the Tennessee House of Representatives. I'm running for the congressional seat that was just cracked into three by Republicans, and the Senate hearing where that was being decided was happening. And I had actually already walked into that committee and was about to sit down when the chair of the committee said on the microphone, "If the protesters and organizers outside of these doors hit the walls one more time, then I'm going to call the question. I'm going to end debate completely," which he has the power to do. And that's not something we wanted to happen. So I stepped out briefly to let all the organizers know, listen, he's serious. Let's make sure we keep it together. We need to make sure we hear the questions. Leader Stacey Abrams was there and was testifying. And you had senators like Charlene Oliver and folks getting things on the record. And so I went out there and then I was going back in. And that's when this happened. Where I was told that the senator had prevented anyone outside of the folks testifying and senators from being and media from being allowed into the room, even though I was just inside. And well, that's where I said, I looked at the guy and I told him, well, it looks like you and I are going to be right here then. And that's how we stood for a while until I put the hearing on my phone and then I watched it standing right there.
I didn't realize that, Gabby, that it was that arbitrary. That's horrifying and absurd. I know you want to talk about some of the work you're doing in this space too.
Look, I think for folks following along at home, what's happening in Tennessee is the result of a very long trajectory of consolidated conservative power trying to make voting harder, limit and dilute Black representation. And really, this recent Supreme Court case in Louisiana versus Calais was a 6-3 ruling that gutted Section 2, which was the last enforceable provision of the Voting Rights Act. And as Justice Kagan said in her dissent, this essentially renders Section 2 and the VRA a quote, dead letter. And so what we're seeing is a cataclysmic upheaval in civil rights law and really a decision that will reverberate across the country. And so right away, states in the South in particular went right to work putting this decision into action to redistrict many Black representatives in Congress and at the state legislative level out of their districts. And so Louisiana, Alabama, Tennessee, incredibly, South Carolina defied pressure from Trump and is not going to do a redraw right now. But we're seeing an incredible uprising of people power. And I think that, what you're alluding to with the picture of Rep. Pearson and what Rep. Pearson is involved with on the ground is a huge push for people power to fight back and say, this isn't right. And actually, we have the right not just to vote, but to talk about this, right? You're talking about an oversight hearing around these new maps. Let's not forget, I mean, Tennessee, Rep. Pearson, you can talk about this. Your chamber and your General Assembly has a history of punishing and particularly Black representatives from participating in the process, speaking out. So, what I want to say is just that this is what the Supreme Court has unleashed. It did not come out of nowhere. This is I mean, Justice Roberts's entire career, in some respect, has been leading up to this moment. He's had it out for the Voting Rights Act for his entire career.
Mhm.
This is really the coda there, but there really is a tremendous groundswell of anger, of feeling that we have to stand up and fight back. And the last thing I just want to say about that is that it's not just within the states where we're seeing this rush to gerrymander. It's in states all across the country. And Rep. Pearson is a co-chair for a national coalition that State Futures organizes, of state legislators who are fighting back against what's happening at the federal level and fighting for our communities. So is a cross-state coalition in solidarity, and cross-state coalition, and that kind of solidarity for all of us across the country to stand together is extremely powerful and important in this moment.
And building on that, Pearson, so what is the plan now? Now that they've gutted one blue district left in Tennessee and they split it up, what is your strategy? What is your plan going forward?
Absolutely. So we're still running for the U.S. Congress in District 9. We know that it is a tougher mountain to climb, but it is still a mountain that is climbable. And we think we can reach the summit because of the groundswell of support, the energy that we are seeing, and the recognition that the racist redistricting that they have done has really just made the map more competitive. And they're going to have to spend millions and millions and millions of dollars, but they don't have people power, which is something I've been talking about for 6 years when we were fighting $1 billion crude oil pipelines to now fighting for our seat after I got expelled, trying to end the gun violence epidemic, to now fighting to make sure that we have opportunity at representation. And so we're still in this fight, and we need people to show up for us and with us. We've had thousands of people go to votejustinj.com, signed up to become volunteers. We are now one of the top fundraisers in the country on the Democratic side over this last week, just because of all the love and the support that we've been given. So we know we have to build this movement off of this momentum. I'm going to Selma and Montgomery this weekend because we know that if we do not invest in the South, if we do not build power in the South, the country will never progress to what we know that it can be. And I think that's what's so powerful about what State Futures is doing. That's so powerful about all the energy right now. It is a recognition that the same places that were the pillars of the civil rights struggle in the 50s and the 60s are still the same places we have to return to be a part of this struggle again. We are seeing a rise of what I'm calling the neo Confederacy
Mm,
because instead of separating from the Union, they have, in a more insidious way, taken the pillars of power within the Union
yeah.
to really seek to silence and destroy Black political voice, brown folks' access to resources. We are under occupation in Memphis right now. And just yesterday, another American citizen was killed by the DEA. This is where we are in our country. The federal government killing American citizens, deporting people, silencing the voices of representatives. Ku Klux Cameron, the Speaker of the House in Tennessee, stripped all Black representatives
Mhm.
of their committees. Like we are in the moment
Yeah.
requires all of our action. And so no one can be on the sidelines.
There
Everybody's
are
got to be in the fight.
There are glimmers of hope. The Tennessee City Council voted 10-0 to condemn the gerrymandering that was done by these, MAGA Republicans. Obviously, it's not binding, but it does show that there is alignment in this space. Um, I think one of the frustrations people have with the broader Democratic Party is this insistence to abide by the rules, a book that no longer exists. How is your mentality different than that? Because it's absolutely clear to anyone watching that you don't give a damn about what the old guard was. You're trying to forge a new path forward. What guides your thinking and your moral clarity in these moments?
I made Dr. King call the fierce urgency of now. Anyone who is trying to play from a rule that their opponents actually took, burned, incinerated it, shredded the ashes, and then threw into the Mississippi River, and you're still trying to find where it's page 125, right? The truth is they wrote a new rule book called Project 2025, and they're implementing every aspect of that. Their rule book also has a spirit drenched in white supremacy, patriarchy, misogyny, homophobia, transphobia, and xenophobia. We know who they are. So let's stop pretending that they care about the rules, that they care about your seniority or committee assignments or your family name or anything like that. None of that matters. They don't care because if they did, why didn't it stop them from breaking up and cracking the only Black majority district?
Right.
Your friendships with Republicans were so important to democracy and so important to Tennessee. Why didn't it stop us from losing our ability to elect our own congressperson of our own vision, values, and culture and identity? It doesn't work. And
Doesn't.
so is we've got to build power. That's what they've been doing, right? Regardless
Yep.
of racist the people are, regardless of how sexist they are, regardless of how xenophobic, they've thought about how are we building power? And it's been sickening to see them do it that way. But for us, we know we're building power for justice. We're building power for equality and fairness. But we've got to build power with working class people all across this country.
Amen to that. And Gabby, I wanted to ask you because we're talking about building power. We're talking about recognizing the old rule book is gone. I often reflect on the fact that Dr. King wrote in his letter from a Birmingham jail that effectively white moderates are worse than the KKK. I'm paraphrasing a little bit, but you get where I'm coming from, where he talks about these insistence on order rather than upholding justice. The work you're doing, Gabby, is to drive a wedge against that narrative and help white moderates recognize that we are facing fascism. Can you talk a bit more about the work State Futures is doing with leaders like Rep. Pearson to make sure folks understand the fierce urgency of now?
Yeah, well, the reason why we're having this conversation with Rep. Pearson is that he is in the state legislature. And folks need to remember that it is in most states, it is the state legislature that draws lines for Congress
Yeah.
and for the states. And on our side, we have overlooked the power of state legislatures for generations. And on our side, we have a fraught history. Of course, civil power has been used as a tool of oppression, right? This is Jim Crow. This goes back very, very far, very deep into our country's history. However, we have put all of our emphasis on building federal strategies, litigation, advocacy, candidates to our peril when we have in fact overlooked the incredible power of state legislatures. The conservative side has understood that state legislatures control districting and they control so many issues that impact our daily lives. They've understood this forever. In fact, one of my favorite, I don't know, wrong word. But something that I think about a lot is back in 2010, Karl Rove wrote an op-ed in the Wall Street Journal saying the GOP targets state legislatures. This wasn't a secret. It was an op-ed in the Wall Street Journal, and he said, "We're coming after state legislatures this year." It was an Obama midterm, and so they knew that they were in a bit of trouble there. Um, and that was their Project Red Map. And they realized that by flipping just a few handfuls of state legislative seats, they could run the table on Congress in terms of redistricting for generations. And they did it. That year, they picked up 11 state legislatures. 15 years later, Republicans have only lost two trifectas at the state level in 15 years.
Yeah.
So we are coming from behind in terms of understanding, appreciating, and nurturing and supporting the fierce champions in state legislatures who are fighting for us, like Rep. Pearson, right? These are the folks who are on the front lines as more and more issues come back to states to decide. And so important that they have the resources, community, and support that they need. So my organization, State Futures, supports a network of now about 850 state legislators across the country who share our values. So folks have heard of ALEC on the right. This is a response, right? We on our side where we share our values need to have a place for state legislators to have solidarity, to strategize together, to work together, and really to think about what comes next for us as a country, because it is going to come from. We can't get away from this. I
Yep.
mean, we're seeing this over and over. Our state legislatures are only growing in power
Yep.
over voting rights, over abortion access, over environmental issues. And so we really need to focus at this level of government and support these folks.
And I wanted to build on that, Rep. Pearson, because Gabby really beautifully and really painfully pointed out that this was not a secret. Karl Rove wrote an op-ed in the freaking Wall Street Journal. Project 2025 was not a secret. They released it to the whole world and said, "We are going to do this, and this is not a joke. This is what we are going to do." And now they are implementing it. Where is the democratic equivalent of that kind of planning and strategy? Why are we not seeing that same level, and how do we build that so voters know that by voting, this is actually going to result in sustained change, not just shift with the elections like the weather?
Absolutely. So I've been talking with some of the folks at the DNC and hope to continue these conversations with folks at the DCCC as well. We need our own Project 2028. We need our Project 50. We need our Project 2075. We need to start presenting to the American people what we believe because we want to see an increase in wages. We want to see universal access to healthcare. We want to see veterans getting the services that they need. We want to see a check on these billionaires and their data centers that are polluting the air that we breathe. And we want to see gun violence prevention laws that stop gun violence from being the number one killer of children under the age of 18. We have a vision. We have policies that stretch across the political spectrum that could actually improve the quality of people's lives. Whereas our opponents, all they have is making the rich richer and the poor poorer. All they have is doing whatever Donald Trump wants, whatever Elon Musk and Peter Thiel want, and whatever this billionaire class of people want that actually ends up polluting and profiting off of the pain of regular, everyday, ordinary people. And they are doing that with an authoritarian playbook. That's why you see ICE, DEA,
Mhm.
Border Patrol kidnapping and killing American citizens. That's why you see state legislatures weaponizing their power against people so that their voices won't be heard or reduced or diminished. But we do need to quite literally articulate what our plan is. And I'm pushing for Democrats to organize in that way to say, hey, here is our project. Here is the constitutional democratic republic experiment if we are able to keep it and if we have power in order to share that vision because we can't just be anti-Trump,
Yeah.
right? He's horrible. He's a white supremacist. I think he is a domestic terrorist. He's led to an insurrection of our own government. He's a horrible human being. But our philosophy can't just be anti him. It has to be
Exactly.
anti the hate that built him. It has to be anti the xenophobia, anti the transphobia, anti the economic policies that have strangulated regular working class people who can't afford medicine and food, who see rent skyrocketing because these private corporations are buying up their neighborhoods, right? It has to be anti tariffs that are hurting farmers and forcing
Yes.
them to close their shops, and Monsanto, who's forcing folks to buy their seeds, right, so that they won't be able to have and sustain their own farming practices without a corporation telling
Mhm.
them to do. Like we have to be very clear about the vision that we are setting for our country and fighting at every level. Yes, I'm running for the United States Congress, but to what Gabby's saying, we have to have strong leaders in Congress and with new leaders with new ideas and a new vision. We don't need to replicate what we've done in the past. We need
That's right.
new energy in Congress, at the state level, down to the city council, the school board, the board of supervisors, the county commissioners, the sheriffs, and the mayors. And by doing that over the next 20, 30 years, we will, and I mean that for because we're in this for the long haul,
Yeah.
we will see, I think, a reverse in what we have seen happening with the dilapidation of our democracy.
And I wanted to build on that. And this is a question for both of you, but I'll ask you first, Rep. Pearson. One of the frustrations I often hear from the Democratic voters is we were told in 2020 that we're running for the soul of our nation, and that voting in Democrats in a trifecta, we'll be able to get all these things we care about: the Voting Rights Act protected, Roe v. Wade codified, undoing Citizens United, expanding healthcare access. And while Joe Biden and Kamala Harris did a lot of good things, these major things didn't happen, and now we're back to a fascist Trump. In Virginia, Democrats organized effectively, and they passed redistricting reform. Only the Supreme Court to say, nope, you know what, 3 million votes, it just doesn't matter. We don't care. Justice Alito on one side says, well, we can't interfere because voting's already begun. And another opinion says, doesn't matter if voting's begun, we're going to interfere. So it seems to a lot of people as a very valid complaint that voting almost doesn't matter. I say almost because I'm a staunch believer in voting no matter what. But I
Mhm.
wanted to convey this frustration that I get. How do we give, and it's a question for both of you, how do we give people confidence in this space when we see so many examples of their votes literally being tossed out and discarded, telling them again, hey, this is the most important election. We need you to vote. How do we overcome that hurdle?
Yeah, I understand the sentiment completely because you're not seeing the changes that you need to see. Sometimes when there's a Democratic administration or Republican administration, the systems aren't changing.
Yeah.
And when you look at who are the members of Congress, the guy I was running against is now worth $10 million. He went into Congress worth $2 million. He trades and sells stocks, and a lot of the people who are contractors for ICE, a lot of the people who are contractors for the military, are people who he has stocks in. And he was a Democrat. right? So you can't be benefiting from a system and then say, "Oh, but I'm against that system." That's why things weren't changing, because the leadership that we had in both parties were ultimately becoming multimillionaires while their people getting richer, quite literally, while their districts were getting poorer. And so you can't have that type of person as a Democratic elected official and then at the same time say, well, I want to change the system. The system is actually rigged and is rigged against working class people. You've got to have people with some moral consistency and clarity to be able to offer the clarion call to people who have felt so disaffected that, look, I am a different kind of politician. I am progressive. I'm also very pragmatic and I am principled. And what I tell you is what I'm going to fight for. So if I'm going to fight for a $25 minimum wage, you can believe that I'm going to fight for universal health care. You can believe that I'm going to fight to end gun violence. I got expelled for it, right? Like we have to have people with some moral clarity and also a commitment to the causes that they say that they care about. That's how people trust again. That's how people believe again. And that's how people want to join the fight, not just for one election, but for every election. Because we're not going to win in just one election. They didn't just win in one election. But if they have people with some moral consistency, I think Democrats are going to want to believe and want to fight and want to organize for the long term.
Love it. Gabby, same question to you.
Yeah, I think we got to start at home and focus on state and local. Half of members of Congress, including the future congressman on the line right now, started in their state legislatures. Half of all presidents started in their state legislatures. These are the places where folks learn how to govern, right? And see the stakes and really learn and get ready for higher office. So the right has known this forever. I mean, they say we focus on the dog catcher on up. And they're serious. They focus on local elections and the pipeline. We really have to focus on our pipeline and look closer to home for those future heroes, right? The people who will be able to take this to the national stage. And what I'd say there is that I think that the good news is that at the state and local level, your vote matters a lot. There are so many, and I don't rep Pearson, I don't know what your margin was, but I know so many legislators whose margins of victory were less than 10 votes. One of my favorite examples is back in 2017, we almost flipped the Virginia House of Delegates. It was down
I
to
remember.
one seat. Shelley Simons, shout out, love you, Shelley, you're the best. And it came down to a tie. To control the entire chamber, it came down to a tie. And in Virginia, the way that they settle this is to pick a name out of a ceramic bowl, and it wasn't her name that was picked out of the ceramic bowl. So the entire chamber fell down to one vote, and that's not just an isolated case. Another example is a couple years ago, the Pennsylvania House, the entire Pennsylvania House flipped because of one district, 72 votes. Missy Serrato, shout out. So at the state level and certainly at the local level, your vote really does matter. And it could, dozens of votes, sometimes less than a handful, control the outcome of these races. And again, this is our pipeline. These are our future leaders who will take us to that next level at the federal level. We need to support them early in their careers. We need to get involved in state and local politics and understand the issues, and that I think is a critical way that we build towards that future at the federal level too.
Beautifully said. And I was in Virginia when that happened with Charlie Simons, and it was painful for all of us for all the reasons. I mean, how many millions of lives impacted because of one measly vote? We're down to our last couple minutes. And Rep. Pearson, I wanted to talk about your congressional run as well. Folks are asking in the chats, with this redistricting, is it just too red now? Do we have a chance? I guess so, kind of a two-part question. One, once you are elected to Congress, what steps are we taking to strengthen the Voting Rights Act and to change the narrative? Because right now, Black people are the only demographic in this country that need to have their voting rights revived every 25 years. How do we fix that? One. And then two, for the folks asking, how can we get involved in your campaign? Obviously, donation, will include that link. But how can folks get involved in a meaningful way to ensure we get you across that finish line?
Absolutely. So fortunately, we still have a pathway to victory in District 9. And so we can win this. And like I said, it's going to be an uphill climb. But as one ancestor said, if the mountain was smooth, you couldn't climb it. And so we're going to climb this
Love that.
mountain. and it's going to take our work, and it's going to take a lot of energy, and it is going to take money, but it's also going to take time. And so if you can donate time to phone bank, if you can donate time to even come down to Memphis, we're going to have a lot of opportunities across the South, but especially in this district and in this election for you to engage. And you can go to votejustinj.com to do that. In Congress, we have to pass the John Lewis Voting Rights and Advancement Act, and we need to strengthen it, seeing what states, particularly in the South, are doing to put some of those things that were currently there, pre-clearance, making the courts once again a place where you can be an arbiter for justice instead of them becoming a partisan political branch that needs to be expanded, by the way. The Supreme Court needs to be expanded.
Yep.
They need ethics rules that they are guided by so billionaires can't buy their homes and buy them RVs and then have cases come before them in the Supreme Court. But that's one of the bills that I know we're going to have to fight for, and we're going to need to pass immediately to protect our rights well into the future, because what is happening at the state levels is going to continue to happen. They're going to push the envelope of democracy and the destruction of democracy as much as they possibly can. But that's going to be one of the first bills that we're going to have to work on, but we're going to have to do it collectively. And Democrats are going to have to be on one accord, that we cannot hope and pray that things are going to get better, or that the better angels of our nature are somehow going to work its way into the South. We can't just have what happens in New York, Massachusetts, and California be our barometer for how things are going. What is happening in the South, that is the litmus test for America's progress. If the South does not progress, the nation is not progressing. If the South is not free, then the nation is not free. And so we need activism, we need organization, we need leadership, we need investment, we need care, we need concern, and we're going to win. I believe in people power. I believe in democracy, demos kratos, people power, more than I ever have before. And so I'm excited to still be in this race. Definitely go to votejustinj.com, get our newsletters, volunteer, sign up. We're having a launch call next Wednesday as well.
Amazing. Beautifully said, Rep. Pearson. We've included the links in the chat. We'll include it when we post this as well. Before we go, last thing, Gabby, how can we support State Futures and the work you're doing with Justin Pearson to continue to fight fascism and reinforce a sense of democracy and justice in this country?
Yeah, as the great American poet Patti Smith says, the people have the power. And that is the case. And that power can be exercised and needs to be exercised at the state and local level. Your time, your treasure goes a really long way at the state level. So please learn about who's running and who's serving in your state chambers, and just add in some information about what's going on at the state level into your life. Check us out at statefutures.org if you want to join our newsletter and learn about some of the amazing leaders in our state legislatures, how they're fighting for all of you, and how you can support them too.
Thank you both for this important conversation. Thank you, Rep. Pearson, for the incredible work you're doing. Thank you, Gabby, for fighting fascism for all of us. We've included their links. Make sure you check them out. Make sure you donate. I am going to finish up this interview and go and donate to Rep. Pearson right now, because I refuse to ask people to do something I'm not going to do myself. So I'll have a donation coming your way, Rep. Pearson. You have a platform on this show at any time. Let's go out and win this election.
Thank you. Let's go do it. Appreciate you so much.
Thank you for tuning in to Let's Address This with Qasim Rashid. Make sure you hit that subscribe button so we can continue to protect your human rights and our democracy. Until next week, peace.